Michael Lane. I'm the president of Liftport Group. We've got a kind of a somewhat quiet show today. Mostly everybody is getting ready for Starship tomorrow, so it's there's a lot going on, but we're not gonna spend a great deal of time. Let me give you a quick recap. Over the last 5 months, we've done about, I don't know, a lot. We've done a lot of episodes, usually twice a week for the last 5 months. Yesterday was different. Usually we're on for Mondays and Wednesdays. Here's the link to our Spotify channel. And that's great. We really love that. But then we have our client, the Mars Society, and we run their Red Planet Live show. So that's also really terrific. Yesterday they had Dr. Jim Green. I really admire Dr. Green. He spent 40 years at NASA. He was basically the number 4 person at NASA, and at one point he controlled a multi-billion, I think $4 or $6 billion science budget. Amazing guy, really great guy. I was fortunate a long time ago, back in 2008, to have had a group dinner with him in Barcelona, of all places. He was a big supporter. He is a big supporter of International Space University. And he was out there to give some lectures. And as coincidence would have it, we were all tagged along to have dinner. And I sat next to him for about 3 hours, just mesmerized. It was super fun. It was great. I was pretty far along. I'd been working on the space elevator for several years by that point, 6, 7, 8 years. And I was just at that transition state where I was thinking about the lunar elevator, but it hadn't shifted yet. But Dr. Green has been a pioneer of going back to the moon for a really long time. So it was kind of terrific to see him again after 15 years. We haven't probably been in the same room at the same time in 15 years. So that was just really great to kind of be around for that show last night. So that was the Red Planet Live show. Lee, if you could put up the link for that, that would be terrific. Thank you. And the rest of our shows, right? So we've been doing these podcasts for a while now. We're starting to get pretty good at it. I'm kind of happy about how this is starting to come together. Like, all the parts feel like they're starting to gel. I want to point out also that there's a couple other really terrific podcasts out there, space money focused podcasts. Peter Garrettson does one on space strategy with the American Foreign Policy Council. So his definitely has an aerospace defense, Department of Defense flavor. So it's less about money, but definitely about U.S. national capabilities. But he strays into money topics all the time. The Aerospace Corporation has the Space Policy Show. They've been doing that for several years, a couple times a month. If you're not familiar with Aerospace Corporation, they are basically the big think tank for DoD, specifically the Air Force, but also Space Force and NASA and a bunch of other organizations. Probably the longest running show on the whole internet would be Dr. David Livingston. He runs the Space Show. That thing has been running for 20 years or more. And that's his whole business, and it has been for a really long time. So he's a remarkable, that's a remarkable resource, and we're all grateful to Dr. Livingston. I've been on that show probably 7 or 8 or 9 times, way back when I was doing the original Earth Elevator work. And then 2 new ones would be the Space Capital podcast. I think they only have maybe 10 episodes, something in that range, relatively new. Good stuff. They're talking about the numbers of space, the financial numbers of space. So that one's really hyper-focused on the capital, the money of space. So I think that one's really fascinating. And then the last one I'm starting to pay attention to is Payload. They do the news of the business of space, the news of the policy of space. And then our guest, Raphael Rodogen, has the Space Business Podcast. So as he jokes, it's not very cleverly named, but it's pretty great. And then the final one I might recommend would be the Space Cafe podcasts. Mostly that's European coverage, and it's less about money, but more broad spectrum of what's happening in the space sector. So those would be the ones I kind of maybe recommend. Space Strategy at the American Foreign Policy Council, the Space Policy Show with the Aerospace Corporation, the granddaddy of them all, the Space Show with Dr. David Livingston, the Space Capital podcast from Space Capital, Payload, the money and news side of the business, and then the Space Business podcast with Raphael Rodogen. So really terrific resources. And then, of course, please pay attention to the ones we're doing, and that would be DareGreatly Space. It's really important to put in the space component because there's about 9 different channels called DareGreatly. So make sure you get the correct one. I'm going to post the link here in just a moment. I've got an ad that just popped up. Let's get rid of that. And that is ours. Here's this. And I've just been notified that I actually forgot that. On the screen, it's actually covered up on my screen where we've got the live button. We have the DareGreatly podcast QR code, so definitely just grab that. Maybe it could be in a different spot, Leah, because it's covered. You don't have any control over that. Okay, this is what we got. If you've got a clear view of it, on my screen I can't see it. I can only see parts of it. But yeah, we've got the DareGreatly Space podcast QR code on the site. So thanks a lot, Leah. I did not see that until just a moment ago. Okay, so that's a rundown of some of the shows. We've been doing the Red Planet Live show for the Mars Society for now 3 months. It's once a month. On Tuesdays at our normal broadcast time, our normal broadcast schedule that we're doing on Tuesdays with them. And this is big news, big news. As of today, we're starting to work on the Space Frontier Foundation's new podcast series. We'll probably have Sean Mahoney. If you remember, we had Sean Mahoney on a couple months ago. We'll probably have him back to talk about the show. we've got kind of two parts to it. The first part that is happening, and then the second part that we hope will happen but hasn't been committed to yet. So the part that is happening is, the Space Frontier Foundation's been around for 35 years. This year is their 35th anniversary. And very truly, you could say that the industry that we have right now, the world that we live in right now, would not exist if it were not for the pioneering efforts of those Space Frontier Foundationers. I've been involved with that organization for over 20 years, so I've been super impressed by them. They do an awful lot of the heavy lifting that has gotten us to where we are. They do it by, holding NASA accountable, calling out errors that they perceive, going to Congress, making changes in laws and policy, being a catalyst for the community to build companies. I can name at least 5 companies that have all started as a direct result of their participation at the Space Frontier Foundation. And I can think of probably 20 companies that have benefited. And that's just me just thinking off the top of my head. So really remarkable organization. So what we're going to be doing is a 10 episode series, just 10. And we're going to take an hour's worth of video and we're going to cut it into 15-minute segments, and we're gonna come up with topics and themes, and we're really focused on those first 10 years, right? Most people don't really know what was going on all the way back 1988 to 1998, and yet I say again, the world that we live in is a direct result of those early pioneering days. That's the end of the Cold War, right? That's the fall of the Soviet Union. That's the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Reconstruction, whatever that means to you. And here's these folks, they call themselves space cowboys very often, who are out there doing really critical work to build the world that we're in right now. They're going to be more humble about it. I'm going to give them credit and say we owe a lot to that organization. So that's going to be a 10 episode series about the pioneering efforts of the Space Frontier Foundation. We hope that there's going to be some follow on to that and that we get not just the history, but present day, like going forward. So they have a whole community of advocates, people who are involved. It's a step below the board of directors, but the advocates are the folks that are actually building space companies and going out and building hardware and building software and building government relationships. And so we're hoping that we can also build a set of shows around the advocates of the Space Frontier Foundation. But what we have committed to, what they have committed to so far, is this 10 episode series focusing on the pioneers. So that's going to be super exciting and a little sad because some of those pioneers have died. And so we have to recreate some of that stuff. If you listen to the Sean Mahoney interviews, we did 2 of them. The foundation gets its roots from O'Neill, Gerard K. O'Neill, and some of the vision that he promoted. And recently, just 2 weeks ago, one of the earliest pioneers of the Space Frontier Foundation, Ben Muniz, died. He had a heart attack. And so if there was ever an exclamation point on the requirement of capturing your history, it's when one of your leaders died and you don't have the brain trust of that person. So we're gonna try really hard to kind of capture some of this. It's really important. And things I think we're short of. Well, I'm not going to talk about what we're going to highlight. I'm going to let Sean Mahoney and his team talk about that. So I just want to announce that we're doing it. It's going to be fun. We're going to host it. These programs probably will not be hosted live. Like these shows are live. We will probably capture them, record them, and then broadcast them in our normal Tuesday night slot. So that's coming. So watch for that. We're going to broadcast the raw interview, and then we'll take the raw interview, edit and splice and do all the magic behind the scenes to turn it into a show. So that's coming. We're hoping to get that started right away. So pay attention. We'll be sending out announcements, and it will look like a live interview, but it won't actually be a live interview. We'll have done that, earlier. Okay, we have to work around other people's schedules, and we're going to try and get like 10 or 12 shows worth of content in the next couple of weeks. So should be exciting. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're really happy about doing this project. On other big news, I'm guessing that everybody who's watching this show knows that Starship is probably going to launch tomorrow. Fingers crossed. We've been talking about the Starship Singularity for 2 years now. I think it's finally upon us. We've talked about Peter Gerritsen's essay on the Starship Singularity. I have one. These are important documents that are talking about the future, that this rocket is going to change the landscape of humanity. And I really stand by that position. I really think that's important. So fingers crossed. Our team is going to get up early. That 5:45 time, I believe that is West Coast time, 5:45 West Coast. So they're launching out of Texas, which makes that 7:45 for them. That's when the live stream starts. We're going to tune in right then. They already scrubbed once. There's talk about high winds tomorrow. We're getting all of our stuff from Eric Berger and a couple other people. So it's kind of the standard sources that you might expect. Twitter, no surprise, is our best friend for new data. The launch window, official launch window tomorrow is 8:28 Central Standard Time, 8:28 Central Texas Time. So watch for that. We will definitely be up and paying attention. And fingers crossed, maybe, here's the thing, right? I've been there when history was made. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I've been there sitting in a bar when next to me history was being made. And you never really know where history is going to happen. I've been fortunate where it's happened a couple times, and that's pretty neat. But rarely is history scheduled. Right. And we know that tomorrow, approximately 8:28 Central Standard Time, that is going to be history. Whatever happens, and as Musk is always saying, excitement guaranteed, whether it blows up on the pad or whether it launches straight into the sky, whatever happens, it's going to be pretty neat. So we're definitely going to be a part of that. That's going to be exciting. And with that, we're going to kind of move away from the news. We had the guest Chris Johnson at the Secure World Foundation on Monday, and that was a really great show. And we're going to have him back because he was fascinating. What you don't know is that he and I had about a half an hour conversation after the show closed, because he and I were just riffing off of each other, right? We had common friends, we had common experiences, we had different friends and different experiences, and we were just sharing uh, about the moon, about his career, about friends that we both know. And it was a lot of fun, but what we didn't get deep into is to talk about the moon, about space policy, about the Secure World Foundation. So he's going to come back and join our show. We're getting him scheduled here pretty quickly. Here's the Secure World Foundation. It's a very good organization. I've been impressed with them for a long time. Fun fact: I interviewed and was soundly rejected to be the executive director of the Secure World Foundation back in 2007. It was a very memorable interview. Yeah, that was an interesting moment. I was absolutely unqualified. I will stand here, with the hindsight of 16 years, I was 100% unqualified for that job. But they were a different kind of organization back then. So the thing that they wanted to do, I was qualified for. What they have morphed into, I would not have been good at that job. But I've been impressed by this organization for a really long time. And then Chris has been there for a couple of years now as their law advisor. So we're going to bring him back. And some of the things that Chris did was this Moon Dialogues document, and it is free. I'm going to share a link to it in a moment. Here is the main channel. That's our channel. There we go. That's the main Moon Dialogues website. And then you can scroll in and find their Lunar Policy Handbook, which I'm going to share in a moment. Okay. Pretty cool book. I'm definitely interested in getting the hard copy. I think that's going to be fun. It's brand new, right? March 27, 2023. So it's one of those things that helps people to understand how this stuff happens, right? You've heard us say before, long before there are policy documents, there's folks sitting in a room working to hammer out what does that policy look like. And then from once those folks have that conversation, it moves into a document. That document's going to be reviewed by a bunch of people. And then ultimately, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes those documents become federal policy, often executive orders, sometimes congressional law. And whether it's congressional law or executive orders, those move into the various departments of the United States. So that would be Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Defense Department, all of those organizations. They read these policies once they have been formally acted on by either the executive or the legislative branch. And those policies become actions, often requests for proposals, and often contracts, research contracts, development contracts. So that's how it moves through the cycle, from ideation to meetings to documents to enacted federal policy to the department level to contracts going out to the commercial sector. This document is not that level yet, right? They've had the meetings, and they've put together a list of where's the let me get that. Hold on just a second. They put together a list of contributors. So those would be the smart people in the room working together. And then from that, they hope that it becomes some sort of policy. So Chris Johnson was our guest the other day. He's recommended that we bring in Jesse K. Schlingler and a couple other folks. So we're going to reach out to them. But that's what this document is. It's about 100 pages, roughly. This is a great list of people. I know many of them. Jesse Kate is an ISUer, and Open Lunar Foundation is well funded from the Silicon Valley sector. I think Steve Jurvetson, if memory serves, I think Steve Jurvetson is the financier behind Open Lunar Foundation. We've had Michelle Hamlin on our show many times for All Moonkind. I'm a big fan of her. And in fact, one of my interns is actually a student of hers right now. So shout out to Austin Brittenham for stepping up and becoming a space lawyer. Angeliki Kapiglau, also an ISUer. She's at European Space Agency. She has been spearheading the European Space Agency's efforts to build space-based solar power. So she put her reputation on the line in a serious way recently and has gotten rewarded for that. So terrific job there. I mostly don't know these folks towards the bottom of the list, so I can't speak to them, but the folks at the top of the list I know personally, and I'm very impressed by them. So I love this team members list. And this is the table of contents, right? Like, what does a good actor on the moon mean, right? This document's brand new to me, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert. I learned about it on Monday, so I have not read this thing. I'm going to read it, and we're going to bring Chris back in, and he's going to walk us through some of this stuff. So rather than me try to bluff my way through knowledge that I don't have, we're going to bring in the experts to focus on. I love the idea of taxes. I love the idea of taxes on the moon. I'm not a big fan of taxes in general. And given that, tax day just passed, I'm sure a lot of people are not fans. But in general, I think the idea of taxes on the moon is pretty interesting. There's a lot you can do with that. End of life obligations after a mission, that's super important. What are we going to do when we land there? Super important. What are we going to do for infrastructure? Super important. So this document really goes into some very serious depth. So we're going to tackle this and dig into it, because this might be how humans, certainly Western humans, operate on the moon. So I just want to point that out, that exists. It's I think it's one of those things that it hasn't become laws yet, but it might become norms. Norms become precedent. Precedent becomes effective law, right? So kind of watch this stuff, because this is going to be important. And with that, I had just one more thing to share, and then I'm going to sign off here. So just bear with me a moment. I thought it was right here, but it's not obvious. Yeah, here we go. Let me load this up here. PitchBook tracks deals in space. No, let me rephrase that. PitchBook tracks venture capital deals. That's their whole business. Their whole database is based on that. And this is an accounting of quarter by quarter how many deals and how big, how much money we're talking about. It's a little on the fuzzy side, but according to PitchBook, $310 million in the space industry in the first quarter of 2023. That tracks with some of the stuff that we showed you last week and the week before from Space Capital, some stuff from Bryce, a couple other sources. We've looked at Deloitte and we've looked at McKinsey. So while the numbers are not exactly the same because there's biases of what to count and what not to count, it's not surprising that the number of deals is basically the same, but the dollar amounts are low. It is surprising that if you've got the list of the top 10 biggest deals, that $8.5 million is even in the top 10, because last year and the year before that would not have made the top 10, not even close. So the size of the deals are probably a little less. Interestingly, I met folks from Starfish and from Atomos at the most recent space industrial base meeting that we talked about 2 weeks ago. So they're already putting their capital to work and trying to go out and drum up business. So that's always good to see. While transaction volume has remained the same, total funding is lower on more conservative valuations as VC firms better position themselves in the capital structure. That doesn't really surprise me. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised about that. I like this last piece, which is why I'm reading it. Without the availability of inexpensive capital pools, deep tech space startups with decades-long R&D schedules and high cash burn are increasingly at risk of consolidation or bankruptcy. This was evident in the recent Virgin Orbit insolvency. So they're taking a data set of one and saying this might be a problem for the whole industry, and I 100% agree. Now, I think consolidation or bankruptcy, I think if those are the choices, you're going to get an awful lot of consolidation. That's how I see this starting to come together. So just something to think about. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anybody. But if you're in that situation where you're trying to raise capital, you can expect lower valuations and VCs pushing their agendas. So I am very curious what the deal terms of these raises look like. And honestly, a company like Axiom, they need vastly more money. Now, they have raised vastly more money, but for them to just raise $15 million does make you wonder what the rest of the story is, because they have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They have hundreds of millions in NASA contracts. So what does their negotiation look like with the investors for this $15 million? I would be super curious about that. And of course, there's no information about that. There's none whatsoever. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close out the night, because we're gonna all be working in the middle of the night tomorrow. So my whole team's going to be up early, so we're not going to sit here and just kind of meander on with the show tonight. We're going to move on with things. So tomorrow's going to be a big day. Fingers crossed for everything. Whatever happens, we want to say to the SpaceX people, good luck, congratulations, and we're rooting for you. The world is rooting for you. So with that, that's all I got tonight. This is like a record short show tonight. So thank you. Have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.